morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who has joined us here today. My name is Srijit, and I'm a Senior Innovations Manager at IDH. At IDH, we work to support and scale technologies that can transform agri-food systems in the global south while keeping smallholder farmers and the environment at the center of it all. I would be the moderator for today's session on how digital tools can facilitate the transition to regenerative agriculture. But before I start, I'd like to lay down a few housekeeping rules. The first one being that, yes, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chats and what you do in the sector. This is important as we have seen several partnerships come out of chat boxes or virtual conferences, so definitely advisable. The second thing is, please put in your questions in the chat box and I'll try to make sure that all of them are answered. At this time, I'll also say that not only questions, but we also want to hear from you, your inputs, your suggestions, your learnings on the theme of the session. So please feel free to keep the chat box interactive. And also for the speakers, if you want, you can also address a few questions on the chat. Apart from that, for the audience, if you want to direct a particular question to a particular speaker, please write their name after the question. The final housekeeping rule is that please keep yourself in mute throughout the course of the session. This is only for housekeeping because many times virtual conferences tend to get a little noisy. So as my first reflection, I would like to say that it's great to see regenerative agriculture getting a lot of momentum globally. For instance, I'm just taking this conference as an example. We have multiple sessions on regenerative agriculture in this conference. And apart from it, it's also good to see another set of sessions that are in the nexus of climate, ICT, and agriculture. I definitely believe that this momentum is justified. And as you would know, the recent IPCC report has said that over the next 2 decades, climate hazards are going to increase and agriculture is going to be at the receiving end if we don't act. In addition, in the long run, land degradation has become a big problem in agriculture, and it is likely to impact both food security and smallholder farmer incomes in the medium to long run. And ironically, it is the sector which contributes around 1/3 to the global greenhouse gas emissions. On the contrary, there has also been research which highlights the benefits of regenerative agriculture. From increasing organic soil carbon to increasing soil biodiversity to actually increasing the climate resilience of farmers. There are several benefits that have come into the limelight of regenerative agriculture. And there have been interesting research pieces which have even shown other type of benefits. For instance, I think 2 weeks back, there was a research which highlighted that food that is produced through regenerative practices can be more nutritious than food that is produced through conventional agriculture. Similarly, I think last year IUCN had the report which said that shifting to regenerative agriculture in certain contexts can actually lead to an increase in yield. So with that background, I think that I would like to reiterate that the growing momentum is justified and there is a big role that ICT and digital tools could play in this context. On that, we at IDH are really elated to kickstart the climate track at the ICTforAg conference, and we have a very special lineup of speakers in this conference. We have Annalise from from IKEA Foundation. We have Kunal, who has joined us from Cropin. We have Tanya from Aggrocares, and we have Tessa from IDH. If I try to introduce these speakers, I would not be able to do justice to the expansive experience that they bring. So I'll like to play it smart and I'll let the speakers introduce themselves and also the work that they are doing in a lot more detail. So we can probably start with Annalise. Annalise, would you like to highlight a little bit about yourself and the work that IKEA Foundation is doing in the realm of regenerative agriculture?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor, and welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. So my name is Annalise Witthoffs. I work at the IKEA Foundation as a program manager in the agricultural livelihoods portfolio. For your background, the IKEA Foundation is a philanthropic institution linked to IKEA, a global furniture store, and we get our resources from them to advance their mission also of helping the many people around the world to live a better life. Our strategy is focused around 2 main umbrella themes, which is building livelihoods for people who are in need and at the same time protecting the planet from climate change. And when we came up with this strategy what was it now, 4 years ago already, we started thinking, okay, so what are the areas that we need to concentrate on? And fairly quickly we came to the conclusion that rural livelihoods and agricultural livelihoods for small-scale farmers are crucial if we want to help people and planet advance. Looking at the triple crisis of climate change, biodiversity collapse, and dire inequality, which is continuing to grow, we thought, okay, let's put our resources to help those people that are in need in rural areas. And how can we best do that? What are the needs of farmers, and what is the need of the agri-food system globally? There was increasing, well, in 2018 when we started, there was not so much evidence yet about how the planetary boundaries are affected by our global food system and how small-scale farmers are affected as the most vulnerable to that. But fairly quickly, we came to the conclusion that we needed to shift or put our resources to help shift the global food and ag system to one that is regenerative and circular. So that's how we started our strategy. And now we are supporting a number of partners, mostly in East Africa and in India, to help farmers make that shift, because it's not an easy one. It's going to be a long one. And at the same time, we also support partners more at the global level who can influence the global food and ag systems thinking by either doing research or by influencing policies, by influencing private sector at the global level to help make that shift. And that is also how we partnered with IDH and how I came to sit in this panel. So looking forward to that and hearing from all the other panelists.
Thank you, Annelies, for highlighting that. And it's great how you started with the two outcomes of building livelihoods and also around in an environment that is seeing climate change, and regenerative agriculture actually comes in between. And actually, it's great how it feeds into the IKEA Foundation strategy. I'll move to Kunal now, and while Kunal, Cropin needs no introduction today, I would still, for the sake of the audience, ask you to describe what you do in Cropin and what Cropin does in the nexus of agriculture, climate, and ICT.
Thanks, Srijit, and thank you so much, IDH, for this particular wonderful initiative of yours. So I'm Kunal. I'm the co-founder and the chief operating officer at Cropin. So Cropin is basically an agtech company, and our mission is basically to bring digital revolution in the field of agriculture and transform it. From innovation to impact is the theme that we have. And the last 11 years, we have been able to bring solutions, innovations to help more than 7 million farmers in more than 50 plus countries right now. And the journey has been that we build programs and we bring technologies to actually understand the program and implement the program in that particular manner. So as a part of the solution and the part of the approach that we take is that we understand, okay, we start with digital solution. You talk about agronomy based advisories on farm management. You then bring components of climate smart agriculture. You then bring components of regenerative agriculture. And then a lot of data gets generated. And this data then is being used by the institution in terms of predictive and prescriptive advisories for the farmers. And this could be climate change advisories, could be disease early warning systems and things like that. So we have seen that technology, if integrated strongly into a program, can actually lead to the impact which the program is intended to. And thankfully, in the last several years, we have run more than 250 plus programs in different parts of the world: India, Africa, Southeast Asia, Europe, even LATAM. We have seen that how technology actually, when given in the hands of the real people on the ground, the extension workers, the farmers, the agronomists, and then they use the technology to transform, it actually starts creating impact. Some of the program, in fact, the IKEA Foundation program in India, for an example, is a Tata Trust initiative, and we are working to help smallholders, farmers in India to adopt technology, understand what crop is more suitable. How do you diversify your income from agriculture? Not just focus on one crop, but diversify. And then when you're diversifying, do it in a very, very structured manner so that it becomes more friendly to nature and friendly for your soil, your water, and the air as well. Now to disseminate this information to say 20,000-30,000 farmers, all the farmers are doing different crops. So we have around 77 crop combination that is running in that particular program. And the farmers will take crops at different times. So how do you bring that intelligence to advise the farmer that this is the right time for you to do the sowing for this particular crop? This is the right time for fertigation. Do not do the application of pesticide because our disease early warning system is not showing any signs of disease coming in your particular farm. So you can save your spray that is happening, and that in turn return to the farmer is you reduce your cost of like inputs, and the nature also gets the benefit of that. So these are the ways that we are actually helping institutions to deliver the programs from technology. The end result is also like, when you actually practice that, the product that comes out is actually different, right? So you can actually consume that and trust you that the value of this product is much higher. But to take it to the end customer, that this is a regenerative product, right, which has been grown in this particular manner, it requires a complete knowledge from production to supply chain to the end customer. And that is where the component of traceability comes in picture. So what we actually connect is that from the seed till the plate and the farmer at the center, how do you connect the dots together and create a value so that not only the nature benefits, but also the farmer benefits in a much longer term. And especially when you're talking about, as our theme goes, that we want to work with every single farmer on the planet, make it traceable and innovate it with technology. I have to really build that scale, and that's what Cropin is focusing on.
Thanks, Kunal. And in a way, in these few minutes, you have really summarized a lot of the things that we'll be going into detail in the session. So thank you for that. It's a great start, and the potential for digital has already been established. We'll dive a lot more deeper into this. While we were curating this panel, one of the key speakers who have joined us today, Tanya from Aggrocares, it was really special for getting her on board because they work directly with soil, and soil is at the center of regenerative agriculture. So at this point, I'll let Tanya introduce herself and also the work that Aggrocares is doing in the domain of agriculture and ICT.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, good morning or hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us to this panel today. Yeah, I'm representing Aggrocares. Aggrocares is a technology provider. We're an ag-tech company since 2013, based in the Netherlands. And the idea behind Aggrocares is to develop new standards for sensors, analysis, soil, feed, and leaf, in a quick, easy, affordable way, and especially for farmers that do not have access or the means for standard analysis, like with chemistry, for example. So we're operational by now in over 30 countries worldwide. And I don't know if this presentation that I said to you,
yeah, sorry about that.
I wanted to give some visuals to technology, so I'm not describing it, but everyone can see for themselves how it looks like exactly. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we have these two tools. One is more laboratory based on 2 different sensors, and one is more of a handheld tool that can be carried into the field. Yeah, and based on a near-infrared, and basically what they do is you analyze your soil with the device connected to your phone and receive crop-specific recommendations within 10 to 15 minutes that have integrated recommendations based on regenerative practices, for example, or optimized fertilizer inputs, measures to improve soil organic carbon. So it depends on the angle and our customers, what recommendations are being given. And the overall aim is to provide fact-based information that allows farmers to make informed decisions for more efficient and sustainable management practices and to manage their fields via our digital platforms. And well, my role as an operational manager is to specifically work on projects related to smallholder production in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. But overall, Aggrocares is active in many different markets. But smallholder farming in Kenya, that's where Aggrocares started, where we come from, and where our heart is. And often our focus is also based on high-value cash crops, especially in the last years, cocoa, coffee, and to develop also together with our partners and customers optimal application solutions for your phone, and to write customized recommendations suitable for the local context, create adoption strategies and trials together with our with our partners. One of main focuses related to more regenerative agriculture practice, especially in a smallholder setting, is to restore degraded soils, improve overall soil health, fertility, for more resilient crop production by promoting practices that will optimize fertilizer inputs, but also apply balance uptake mechanism to stop depleting soil, restore soil organic matter, but also pH levels. And especially in the recent years, our focus and the focus of our customers has been shifting more towards carbon sequestration, restoring soil organic carbon levels. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanya, for giving us this introduction. And finally, I'd like to move to Tessa to describe a little bit about the work that IDH is doing in the domain of regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, super. Thanks a lot, Srijit. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for coming today. I'm very happy to see so many people have joined us this morning or afternoon for many of you. Yeah, my name is Tessa Medestein. I'm Senior Program Manager at IDH. I normally work mostly in coffee, and that's also where I work together actually with most of the other panelists or their organizations, but also focused quite a bit on regenerative agriculture. And within coffee, together with the IKEA Foundation, we do a big program on regenerative agriculture in Kenya and Uganda. So IDH overall, we do a bit more than regenerative agriculture, but it's actually a topic that really binds everything together that we're trying to do. So as IDH, we focus on better jobs, better income, and better environment. And I've heard it coming out with the other panelists as well, but it's really that intersection between especially better environment and better income. But if you talk about plantation work, better jobs as well, where regenerative agriculture sits. The way we look at this is we work in emerging markets, we work in commodities, but we also work through landscapes. So it's not always crop specific, but it can also be jurisdictional. And regenerative agriculture, the nice thing about it, it's very much diversity driven. So if you focus on a landscape approach, you're actually able to connect all the different dots. If you look at IDH and where we see a role for ourselves within this whole transition towards regenerative agriculture, then it's really in those transition pathways. So we work in many different commodities, different approaches. We have investment funds as well. And what we see as a nice position is how can we leverage all of that, the networks, the coalitions, the investment, and the innovation power to then make the transition happen. And we'll talk a bit about the challenges later, but I think that transition is an actual one of that. So we really hope to bring together the different groups working on this, and today's an example of that, but then also what can we learn in the field? How can we influence the dialogue at a sector level, at a landscape level, and how can we work with businesses to actually change the way they do business to work towards regenerative agriculture. And I would say that technology is actually a crucial enabler to all of those. So I'm very pleased to be able to talk a bit about that today.
Thank you, Tessa, for describing this in detail. And I'll stay with you for this. And just to give a context to the audience, regenerative agriculture, while practices have been followed from a long time, today there are different organizations that define regenerative agriculture differently. Like everyone has some of the few things that they look into. So before we move into the discussion on technology and regenerative agriculture, I just want to align on the definition, and I'll start with Tessa on that. Tessa, at IDH, how do you define regenerative agriculture? What are some of the key criteria?
Yeah, thanks a lot. And to be fair, it looks like a simple question, but it's actually not a very simple answer, to be fair. It's and part and parcel of that is that it's complex, right? We're trying to change a whole system. But that's in the end also what it comes down to. So it really needs to be a very holistic approach that does not just focus on environment, but focuses on environment and on farmers or workers in plantations. It needs to work towards retaining or restoring ecosystems. So that's the essence of it. It's not extractive, it's regenerative. And with that, the outcome is that you work towards resilient ecosystems that then, including the people in those ecosystems, that regenerate. So it's very broad. It's diversity driven. It's very context specific. So there is not a, let's do A, B, and C, and then we're regenerative. It's very much focused towards what is the outcome that we want to achieve, and that's working towards that resilient ecosystem, including the people in there. So that makes it complicated, because it also means that if you go to a place, you need to figure out what does regenerative mean in this context. And that's not something that you as a person need to figure out. It's something that needs to be carried throughout the space where you're working, right? So I heard Annelies refer to it a bit as well, but it's so crucial that the actual people doing it are the ones who are driving it. And therefore, and I really want to stress that it's not a one size fits all. It's not a, I do practice A, B, and C, and therefore I'm regenerative. No, it's working towards that outcome, but it takes time. So it's really holistic, it's diversity driven, it centralizes both environment and the people in the environments to go towards resilient ecosystems. That would be, I would say, the definition that we use, which I recognize is very broad.
No, thank you for that. And one of the things which it really highlights is that how you mentioned that it is not only about the environment, but the people in the environment. And that is something which makes a lot of difference when you're looking at global development and actually looking at the smallholder farmers who form a part of the ecosystem. So that's a great nuance to the definition. Since Annelies is also leading programs on IKEA on regenerative agriculture, Annelies, would you like to add any points to what Tessa has said in the definition, or any specific things that you look at?
Well, there's not a lot to add. It's indeed, we struggle with the same problem, and I think everybody here on the call, there is no one single simple definition of regenerative agriculture. So likewise, I like to pick on what you said about it's outcome driven. It's really about people and planet, and looking at, as it is so context specific and as it is so holistic in nature, you need to look at the outcomes rather than the immediate inputs that you put into a system, or the outputs that you want to get out of it. So we look at it, we don't have a standard definition either. We leave it to the partners to define it, but we emphasize indeed the people's angle very much so. People must be at the center. It must be holistic. It must be often landscape driven rather than crop driven or single value chain driven. So we often also take a landscape approach. And maybe to add one single thing to what Tessa said, we like to see it also as the flip side of the circular economy, the circular agricultural economy. So regenerative agriculture as the production side of things, but looking at it throughout the value chain and throughout from farm to fork, really, how it fits into a circular economy for food and agriculture. I think that is for us also key. It's really about minimizing waste. It's about optimizing use of all resources within the chain. And it's about diversification as much as possible so that you create resilience for people and planet. I think that is what I can add to it. Tessa said most of what the problem with the definition is, but also what makes it the beauty, I think, because it's so individual and context specific.
Yeah, great. And three things that you say towards the end, it's around how you tied it to circular agriculture, also managing waste, optimizing resources, and diversifying production. So these are probably three principles that can help anyone who is looking for defining it in their context. At this point, I'll just check with Kunal and Tanya if you have any reflections on the definition, or if you would want to add anything. I'll start with Tanya first. Anything that you would want to add?
Oh, I think there's not too much more I can add. Tessa and Annelies really captured it.
Great. Kunal, anything from your end?
Yeah, so I think pretty much completely agree to the two views that we had. And what to add from our side is that I think the sustainability of the entire program should also revolve around the farmer, right? because we are actually looking at a transition that has to happen. And when we work very deeply in our programs, there are three important things that comes as a question to us. What is the cost? What is the revenue benefit? And what is the risk? Right? So cost, revenue, and risk for a farmer is very important when we think about a program which is different from what the farmers have been practicing. Right? And that is where technology really plays a very, very instrumental role. Because if you understand that if I'm changing the approach for that particular farmer, I have to understand whether that particular environment is suitable for that particular change. The second thing is in terms of will the farmer will be able to change, and does he have the infrastructure to ensure that change? And when you go and talk to the farmer, he may need access to capital, right? And the capital might not be available. So that is where the landscape approach that we're talking about is that bring a holistic system and think farmer at the center and optimize his costs, right? Increase his revenue, because if you are growing and bringing a transition, how I can actually help the farmer. If I'm growing different and I'm earning $1,000 from an acre of land, can I make it $1,500? Which means that product has to reach to the market, which means when I'm building the program, I'm also getting my partners who can actually come and be the beneficiary of that particular program, right? So I think it's a long approach when we are talking about regenerative, with farmer at the center and the participation from the ecosystem, which will actually make the entire program sustainable. And sustainable, when I'm saying, it's not from the program perspective, but from the farmer perspective. Because at the end, what we believe is that it is not an external push that should lead it to that particular change. It should be organic from the farmer in certain point in time, that after 2-3 years of transition, he feels this is the best way for him to, this is the best thing that has happened to him. And then he continues that journey.
The farmer at the center, and like I was saying, this is what pleases me about the panel. The smallholder farmer is very important for us all. So I think for this ICTforAg, which also focuses on low and middle income countries, the whole conference has a higher focus on smallholder farmers. That is what makes this panel very relevant. Now we have spoken about the definition, and some of the key things come to mind. One of the first statements that Tessa made, that regenerative system is actually regenerative and restorative rather than extractive, is something that we can also stick to. While we are talking, in the introduction, I spoke about some benefits that regenerative agriculture has, and also some of the key reasons why we should look at regenerative agriculture going forward. The benefits are well established, the definitions are getting established, but globally, when I speak to stakeholders, the transition, it's often one part of the challenge, the broader challenge of regenerative agriculture that program implementers and also technology service providers face. So here I would like to go to Annalise, and specifically from her programs, I would want to understand what are some of the key challenges that you see that prevents smallholder farmers from transitioning to regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, thanks. And as Kunal was speaking, I think I can structure my answer a little bit around how he said it's about three things: risk, revenue, and cost. And I think that's also where we see most of the challenges, really. Starting with the risk, if you look at smallholder farmers, often their plot size, their land size is too small to really have a broad diversification of products. And also, you can't do regenerative agriculture on a plot. It needs to be in a landscape. It needs to be together with others. So it needs to be almost at community or landscape level. And that brings together a risk, because who is going to be the first mover? And how do you know that others are not going to bring in heavy levels of fertilizer or pesticide, for example, that will then run down on your land? Which will make your regenerative efforts null, really. I think that's a risk, knowing who's the first mover, how are you going to move together, but also the uncertainty of what it brings, of shifting your current system to one that is more diversified, one that is regenerative, that uses other inputs or less inputs, or that uses different crops. So you may face a risk of a dip in production, in yield in the first years. It is a long-term effort. And I think we need to be very wary of that risk for smallholder farmers, because they cannot afford to spend 2-3 years with a dip in yield and a dip in revenue, really. So that is, I think, something that we need to be very wary of in our programming. And then going back to along the value chain, another risk is that if you move into regenerative agriculture, the idea is that you will diversify your crops, diversify what you are doing, but it also means that you need a certain volume to be able to sell it to the market. Otherwise, it doesn't make business sense, really. So the aggregation of products and market access for multiple produce, I think, is a risk, but also an opportunity that could be solved by tech. I think there's a lot that could help there. I wanted to also touch a little bit on the people that we're working with, smallholder farmers often, and it's often forgotten, but a lot of the work is done by women. And regenerative agriculture may be more labor intensive, maybe more demanding more from women on their fields. I think there's also a solution there for tech to make sure that it is gender sensitive and that people, women and men, can access it. I looked at the program. I think there's other sessions that will go more in detail on that with, I think, hand in hand as a session later today. But that is, I think, also a risk that we need to be really aware of who we're working with in moving towards regenerative agriculture, and how does it affect, from a gender perspective, also their efforts. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about the costing. So the cost of the production from the one hand, but also the costing of the produce and the pricing. I think there is a need to transition to new economic thinking and to move into true cost accounting. So really measuring all the benefits and all the costs of conventional agriculture and putting that against what the cost and the benefits is of regeneratively produced produce. And it's a challenge rather than a risk, but I think it is a key one to get the costing and the pricing right. So there's also a lot of work there, I think, at policy level to be done, and a lot of data needed to really figure out what is the true costing of your produce. I'll stop there. I think there's many more challenges, but let's keep it a bit positive.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of challenges, and I think, when it comes to smallholder farmers, things around standardization and who is the first mover will become a very big challenge compared to larger farms and larger agribusinesses that are trying to have their own land converted to regenerative. Similarly, data and uncertainties about revenue and what happens is going to be a challenge. Market access is also a big challenge. Yes, and also the assessment of the true benefits and cost. I don't think if we have a universal framework as of now, and that is something that can be worked upon. I'll just move to Tessa here. Tessa also handling regenerative agriculture and plantation crops and also otherwise. What do you think are some of the challenges? Do you have anything to add besides what Annelies has added?
Yeah, so I think a lot was being said already. Very quickly on the risk part, but I agree with all the risks that were mentioned. I also think we need to think about where the risk lies, because we tend to talk a lot about the risk is with the farmer, which is where it is right now. The question is, should it just be there? And I think we can think in different ways around how do you transfer the risk away from the farmer? And there's different ways in which you can do that, but what's the role of the supply chain in thinking around longer term offtake rather than year by year, right? How can we start thinking around that? Because then the risk is actually shifted away from one part in the supply chain to multiple parts in the supply chain. So I think that's an additional one to think around. How do we look at that? Access to finance, access to investment, access to markets, that was all mentioned. Those are definitely challenges right now. Volumes is a part of that, quality is a part of that. But also currently we just see that our market systems are very much built upon one crop, typically. So trying to actually combine that and see where the benefits can be made from broadening that is a challenge, but an opportunity as well. I think one big one, which I haven't heard too much, is around time as well. So transitioning into regenerative, and we just said it's outcome based, that takes 5 to 10 years. So how do you know you're on the right path? When do you start calling it regenerative? When can you market it as regenerative? And that's not necessarily year one. So when do the benefits start to come in? So time is a big thing there. And if I just reflect on IDH as an organization, we typically work in projects of 3 to 5 years. That is not necessarily enough time to actually say, and now we're there, now we're regenerative. So time is a big issue. Specifically also, if we look at that, most of the farmers that we actually work with already experience a lot of issues with climate change. So resilience is a real issue at this point in time. So thinking around how do we work with the different timescales that we have to deal with is a big thing as well. Then I did hear data. That's a challenge and an opportunity, I would say, but understanding where is the business case for all the different partners, what kind of systems work in what kind of contexts, what kind of things can you generalize versus what you can't, are all things that will help in scaling. But currently we do not have the data to actually say many meaningful things around that. So getting that data, sharing the learnings is a challenge, but definitely a big opportunity. And I really do think that tech can play a big role in all of that, actually. So both in the finance, investment, risk part, but also, and that's a quick example I want to mention here, in the market systems. So if we look at something like SourceUp, then you see that's a market system to a landscape. I think there's a lot more creative thinking that can help around how do we build those kind of systems, and tech is typically a way to enable scale on those systems as well. So that's a little add on what was said.
Great, Tessa. And you mentioned SourceUp towards the end, and since I'm from IDH, I have a little visibility about it and its potential, but would you like to explain what SourceUp is in a little more detail and what it actually does?
Yeah, most definitely. So in its very essence, I would say SourceUp is the market end to a landscape. So IDH works in landscapes, which means that we have a jurisdictional basis where you bring together stakeholders. Together you define these are the goals we want to reach in this area, and these are the plans that we're going to work on to get there. What SourceUp does is they have a number of global parameters that they work on, and then there's the local parameters, because it's not the same in every landscape, so it has to be localized. And it, on a digital platform, it showcases the improvement that was being made in that particular landscape. Then there's different roles that market players can play in there. So one is to be an investment partner into the activities on the ground. One is to actually source produce from that area and say, hey, this is, I don't know what's the official name now, but say this is SourceUp coffee from that area, and this is what was done in that area. And that is a new way to look at how can we get area-based, almost verification of progress, because it's not so much a compliance-based system, but it's much more a how do we together define progress and what's our end goal and how much did we get there. And it's really, I would say, the digital platform that enables it to be global. So it's the market end. It's not the only market end solution to landscapes out there, but it's definitely a next step in how do we look at these kind of things.
Great. So it's already that there's some use of digital already, at least, and people are exploring digital platforms for supporting landscape-based approaches. So that's a great positive to hear. Like we have established a few of the challenges, and at this point of time is where I get taken into the picture, and I actually want to start with Kunal and Tanya each and pick up a few challenges and see how technology can solve these challenges. So probably I'll start with Kunal first, and Annelies had initially mentioned that in smallholder farming landscapes, aggregation is a challenge. And when with aggregation, one example she took, which actually struck me, is that if you have 10 farmers and one farmer uses some method which does not go with regenerative agriculture, maybe the use of chemical fertilizers, synthesizer, or any pesticides, which can actually impact the entire landscape. So Kunal, do you think that technology has a role to play in standardization of practices across smallholder farmers in landscapes? And if yes, how can it be done?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, no, it starts with an approach, like, no. So, so for one of the programs that we're working in one of the states in India, like, no, where we are talking about, we have around 3,000 village level entrepreneurs, and these are all more like, no, women entrepreneurs, and they are a part of the producer group, right? So how the entire change is structured, that a producer group will have a set of 20 to 30 farmers, which will be headed by a entrepreneur within that particular group, and the initiative will be framed around that. So this particular state has around 3,000 such village level entrepreneurs. And then they have the overall system for supporting 150,000 farmers. Now, when we talk about going into the details and understanding that how this entire change can happen and what technology can play a role. So when we go and talk to these farmers, and there are these like 30 women farmers which are there, and they would say, what crops you are growing right now? Someone will say, I'm growing this particular crop, this variety. Someone would say, okay, I cannot grow because my water facilities are not there, right? Someone will say, I'm growing it for my self-consumption. Someone is saying, I do not have the surplus to take it to market. So there's a combination of systems which is existing in that particular region, right? Or the village, if you want to say. Now, how do you bring that change? And when we go and say that, no, how can we bring a transformation so that, no, you take care of your own needs, but also produce certain surplus amount which can also go to the market. So the approach that happens is that, then we have cluster-based approach, and this is a 2-crop approach that we normally take, like 2 or 3 depending on the variety. And depending on the location, we actually use a lot of data to mine that what crop variety is most suitable to that particular region. And when we say regenerative, like, we also identify that 50 years back, right? If you see agriculture, a large majority of agriculture was all natural regenerative, right? Can we bring back that agriculture in that particular state, but make it in such a way that it becomes efficient for that particular farmer, be more productive, profitable for that particular farmer, right? So then what happens is then we structure and get this data and then pick up certain crops. So you select 2 crops, say tomato and say brinjal. And then you say that if I have to grow tomato, right, with a set of farmers, which is having hardly an acre of land, and 30 such farmers, so you have 30 acres of land, out of which say 15 acres of land will go for their own self-consumption. So you have only 15 acres, which is left for your marketable surplus. Now in this 50 acres of land, like, if I give the opportunity for the farmer to select everything on their own, they would go to a vendor, they will buy a seed, they will do a planting in certain areas. So it starts with the planning of the crop. And what we have identified and seen is that we have like group-based nurseries, PG-based nurseries, where we plan from the time of sowing itself that what crop variety will be picked at particular PG producer group, and grow that in the nursery. So when the plant comes out, say 100,000 plant comes out, it gets distributed in this 30 locations. But what happens is the crop grows at the same time. The output comes at the same time. And then we know the location of the land, it is there. And during this process of implementation, we are able to take care of the crop in a seamless manner across all these 30 areas, right? So which means if I'm adding a practice, it has to be done across, if I'm doing an earthing up or a weeding operation, it has to be done consistently across all of these farms. So the practice is common, the results are also common, and then the results are better because then all the knowledge goes into all of these farmers. And then once you implement that, there's a marketable surplus that comes out. And this surplus, because that is practiced in a certain manner, is shown to the market much in advance. Because if you see one PG is growing tomato, there are 50 PGs which are also growing tomato, say 1 ton per week, and then is 50 ton per week. Then we are showcasing to the market that this particular location, there are 50 PGs, and this is a marketable surplus that is going to come in the month of April. Every week, what is the output that's going to come? And there are different crop varieties. So the market-led production planning is done, and the market is made aware that what is going to come at what point in time. So when I'm changing a practice for the farmer, I'm assuring that it is not, it's because the farmer is at a risk, right? I'm de-risking the farmer by bringing the market much in advance and helping the farmer to practice that. In between, what also happens is that there is a need of finance, right? So the initiative or the government or the bank comes and finances this particular producer group, that if you are changing this particular practice, I will give you $1,000 finance, right? Which you can distribute based on need, right? So the producer group distributes this finance, and they then use it for the right components, right? They would have one demo farm, which will be the demo farm for the entire producer group. All the learning happens in that particular area, and then implementation happens all across. So there is a collective participation, and the knowledge gets shared in that particular manner. So I think this is something that we have seen as an approach really working for practicing and actually giving the results in a very, very sustainable manner.
Got it. And thank you, Kunal, for that. Just as a follow-up, I remember 4 or 5 years back, I had interacted with Cropin, and you had this platform called Smart Farm, which was used by businesses to communicate with farmers and actually provide information on what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done across this planting cycle or across the life cycle of a crop. So can Smart Farm be also tweaked to have information on regenerative practices and then communicate to farmers via Smart Farm? So is there a role that platforms such as those can play?
Absolutely. So that's what the platform does, right? So we have these thousands of farmers which are on our program, and we actually implement this regenerative practice, from the time of crop planning to the time of the sowing, because sowing window is also very important, to the time that how do you do crop care, to how do you do the cover cropping, and how can you actually maximize the income from that particular farm, right? So all of this knowledge goes to that particular farmer in that particular cluster. So if you are a cluster of a certain crop, then the knowledge of all that we know about regenerative goes to that particular cluster. So and then when it goes to the farmer, it goes in the form of a communication channel. So we have applications at a producer group, you'll have one farmer application, and this is the source where the producer group actually showcases to all of the farmers, because not all the farmer has a smartphone where you can demonstrate and send a video for training and things like that. So it happens digitally at that PG level, but we also communicate it at a personal level to the farmers, right? So when a certain practice has to be followed, it is actually gone as a signal, as a message or IVRS service, which goes to the farmer, and farmers knows what has to be done. Now, in addition, our risk component, risk is very important, because when you're changing a practice, there are inherent risks which is there in the ecosystem. A pest or disease may happen because this crop is certainly new, right? The first thing that happens is that in our program, the first cycle, we actually try to reduce the losses at the farm level when there is a new practice being followed, right? So we have a mechanism through which if there's a pest and disease that comes, you actually record that, and there is a set of agronomies which actually replies back, right? So you try and resolve the risk for the particular farmer. But next year, what happens is that we have a data that this particular risk for this particular crop came in this particular point in time. And then we correlate it to the other factors, like the weather factors, the soil factors, and things like that. And the next year, we build a disease early warning system, which means I know that for this particular crop, which is in this particular village, this location, this is the weather condition, and I'm able to preempt and proactively tell the farmer that in the next 7 days, this is the problem that you might face. Do this particular operations right now. So we are able to use the data to not only support the farmer in the initial phases, but also leverage it in the next phases so that you can be much more productive, and you actually cross your threshold of income that you were earning earlier in that particular manner.
Got it. So just one of the important thing that comes out is that with the use of ICT, you're not only communicating and standardizing practices in the best manner, but you're also creating a trail of data which can be leveraged to solve the data problem on regenerative agriculture, on what works and what doesn't work. So at a level, taking care of many uncertainties in the coming years. So thank you for that. Yeah, I'll just move to Tanya here, and specifically when it comes to the point on understanding the benefits to soil from regenerative agriculture. In terms of Aggrocares work and specifically with soil, how do you see your technology being used in the context of regenerative agriculture and the growing discussion around carbon finance and actually creating alternate streams of income for farmers? Do you think it's possible through your solution, and how can it be done if it is not possible now but can be done in the future?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think in the context of our solution specifically, it's a supportive tool, well, to create awareness, to develop farmer skills, to bring them back more in touch with their soils, learn about soil fertility and soil health, which we see still as a big issue, and also as a challenge, right? I mean, also in terms of adopting regenerative agricultural practices, we see there is still a lot of lack of knowledge on how to implement these practices and how to realize them. Well, of course, also I think that's also what Kunal already said, that these farm management decision and support softwares also that we have, they're built on data streams that are collected for the very first time, right? That can help to develop new and local standards, guidelines for regenerative agricultural practices. So helping also policymakers, governments, extension officers to support farmers in this transition phase. And we can, of course, be a supportive tool that is being used for that. Yeah, and for farmers, well, what our vision is, or what we see, is just to make informed decisions, right? Monitor their impact over time. It's a long-term process that already has been mentioned as well. But maybe also a tool for new generations to enter the agribusiness sector, as we still see there's this big gap between generations at this moment. And there's not so much traction from the youth or incentive to enter the sector. As it's still too little outcome for too much hard work. So this modernization step that is in between could be contributing to bridge that gap and to create more incentive. Yeah.
And I'll just stay with you here for a minute. And one of the things that was happening in India, actually, I'll take an example. The government was making digital soil cards that were for farmers, and these became like the unique soil IDs, if I may call it them. So using your solution, do you also make digital IDs that stay with the farmers and actually monitor the changes over a period of time? Because that could be a great monitoring tool to say what works and what doesn't work in the context that you are operating in.
Yeah, absolutely. So how it works, we calibrate. So first of all, we more or less digitalize and create the database on a more local context, and then we provide the tools, and with the tools, of course, also access not only to an application but also to an entire management portal and platform that can be used by the farmers itself. Of course, that all of this setup relies on somewhat of an infrastructure that enables digital solutions to be there, and farmers to be able to have access to these solutions, right? But essentially, it is about monitoring over time, and not only monitoring. Of course, we measure mainly soil, but not only measuring soil, but also putting into a bigger context in terms of weather, monitoring NDVI values, probably hoping to realize diseases before they spread too far through NDVI. And we're trying to integrate as much data as possible, and also to widen the scope away from only soil analysis, but also to leaf tissue analysis to complement soil analysis, and also feed analysis for livestock feeding. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And actually, you're covering a lot of the risk angle and the challenge around risk and uncertainties that was spoken about in the beginning. Here, I again have another follow-up question for you, and specifically because you work in 30+ countries, and you started off in Kenya, where the focus was on smallholder farmers. So around 4 or 5 years back, when I was working in the technology space, one of the key challenges that someone had highlighted to me is that technology is not scaling in agriculture because we are asking the wrong question. We are asking whether farmers will be able to pay for the service, rather than asking who will be able to pay for the service. So in your context, who do you think is the financier of the service? And what approach do you use there?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think we've been through a lot of learning curves. Indeed, for us, our customers are not the farmers directly, right? The farmers are the users of the technology, but the finance behind the technology comes from the stakeholders within the value chain. The traders, the suppliers, they're financing these projects, or also NGOs financing the technology to a certain degree, at least, to assure a startup and assure that there is capacity building also on the technology and trainings. That's also part of Aggrocares' responsibility. But essentially, they enable all of this for the farmers to have access to, and support the transition in some way, right? It's the responsibility of the entire value chain. I think Tessa said it also earlier, to assure the farmers have the tools and the means to implement and bridge also the gap of this transition phase.
Great, great. So it's actually about spreading the cost across who benefits the most on the value chain. This is actually a tricky case because in regenerative agriculture, often the costs to transition are personal where the benefits are public. So that's always becomes a very tricky case. I'll just move to Tessa here. And Tessa, we have thought about a few use cases which already exist. Like we are talking about standardization of practices. We are talking about risk aversion through early warning systems. We are also talking about like SourceUp, which is connecting local compacts to global markets. So apart from there, from your work, do you see some other use cases or a technology wish list, something that could have happened via technology that can really benefit your programs? Anything that comes to your mind?
Yeah, super. Thanks a lot. So I think there's a few existing ones, and then a few I would like to see, if I may be maybe a bit bold. So on the existing ones, and you see it at a smaller scale, but it would be great if it can be done at a larger scale, is how do we integrate resilience into things like access to finance, right? Can we actually more resilient farms should have a lower risk profile and therefore should have access to finance? How can we bring the two together? And I know it's happening at a small scale in some areas. I know it's happening in Kenya on some coffee farms, but really, how do we build an incentive structure that really rewards going into that transition? And I think right now there's a lot of opportunity to scale that. So I definitely see one there. And similarly, how do we link that back? And that goes to Anneliese's point earlier in the session. How do we link that back to the valuation of the products that we actually bring to market that are regenerative, that support these systems? So I think there's a few use cases we can think around about incentivizing and bringing benefits to farmers on the financial end as well. So that's, and I know there's a few out there, so that's an existing one that I think would be nice to scale. Then I think another one, which is, which I haven't seen, but would be very useful, I think, is around, we've been talking a bit about it, but aggregation. And we do say it's context specific. What you do to get to regenerative is context specific. But it also makes it much more difficult to learn at a global scale. And what we're trying to do is to really move away from projects here and there to a movement that spans global agriculture. So how do we then take whatever data we have and what we find to learn about what is context specific, but maybe what are the things that we can do in multiple places, and under what conditions should we do A, B, and C? And for now, I think that bigger learning agenda, I see a huge opportunity there. And I do hope that by building coalitions that look for answers to these questions, we might be able to come up with something. And I do think that all of the things that were mentioned by Kunal, by Tanya, feed into this discussion, because in the end, what we need is to move from projects to how do we change the whole agricultural system. And right now, if I'm being pessimistic, it's still a lot of projects.
Great, Tessa. And yeah, I think it's a lot of work that needs to be done. And while all the three things that you mentioned really are things to think about, the first one on access to finance and risk profiling of farms is something which I think with better data, we'll definitely be able to do. And before moving to Kunal and Tanya for their reflections on this, I'll just ask Anneliese. Anneliese, do you have anything to add where there is one challenge for which you don't have a solution, but technology you feel can really help you address?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's what Tessa said was really very rich and indeed something that we would be on the lookout for. We're working with some of our partners on it, of how can you make a better risk profile of those farmers that are moving into regenerative and thus become more resilient, as we assume they do over time. But it's a long time data collection effort. And I think it's important to work with banks on this as well. So for the finance, there's also definitely a role here. And what I would like to see, and it goes a little bit to the second point of Tessa, is really that ecosystem of digital tools to exist, rather than having individual solutions for either for different parts along the value chain, right? And I understand that it's I wouldn't want one company to build the whole ecosystem, but I think it's important that all those that care about regenerative agriculture and how to empower farmers through digital technologies, how can we bring them together and build that ecosystem that really provides the tools to farmers to help them make the shift all the way to the market access, but also tools for politicians, for policymakers to use, for banks and lenders to use the data, and eventually also for the customers to be able to trace back where the produce comes from. And building such an ecosystem of companies that all work together is difficult in our current economic thinking. But I am a firm believer of a new economic thinking where collaboration and working together is going to change a lot. So I would love to see that. That will also help the larger corporates to trace back where do they source from, how can they improve their value chains. And it, in the end, will help also the small scale farmer and the consumers, who I think are the two main people in this field. So that's what I would love to see.
Great, thank you, Annelies. And this point on actually bundling of services and providing end-to-end support through farmers is something which is, I think the world is moving towards that. And while we're talking about an ecosystem of digital tools for smallholder farmers, there's also an ecosystem that digital technology service providers require to scale. So I'll move to Tanya here to understand a little bit on, for Aggrocares, you work in 30 countries. What are some of the enabling environment things which have really supported you in specific countries, and what do you think can change, or what is the ecosystem that you require to actually set up your operations and start supporting smallholder farmers make the transition?
Yeah, I think one of our learning curves over the time was to go more local, have more local suppliers, and engage also more with local suppliers that are directly linked to the farmers. And we, from our side, just like a technology provider, are not so much in the forefront anymore, but we try to channel everything to localize suppliers or companies. Just because we have this ongoing challenge of pre-existing ideas of how farming should be done, common practices that are still in place, that extension officers often still use, that governments support. Changing all of that is fighting this entire system, which is very difficult. And so it is a step-by-step process involving more local knowledge and trainings, and that's one of our ways of how we want to engage a bit more and create more awareness on the farmer side. But it, of course, would be more appreciated if policy making was more included and was more supportive of these innovative technologies, not only in terms of enabling connectivity, which is obviously also a big challenge overall, but just also on the practice side.
And so infrastructure and connectivity is definitely one of the big challenges, and especially because you work in difficult geographies also. Like you mentioned policymakers. So in any of the countries that you work in, is there something that comes to your mind which was like, wow, this is great and this is what other countries should do as well, just in terms of a policy measure or anything that was really supportive of you guys?
Well, I mean, there are a few countries, Rwanda, for example, who just put in place a lot of supporting frameworks for regenerative agriculture, support for their farmers, strategies how to achieve that. I think that's already a good start, and indirectly also supporting innovative agriculture to be in that space and be available to the farmers. Otherwise, so far it has been more challenging with policies, and also governments change their regulations. Governments change altogether, and their ideas and goals change. So also there a more long-term approach in terms of agriculture. Agriculture is not just a period when the government is in place, but more longer term would be needed.
That's Rwanda is something that I'll also look into a little deeper as to what they are doing, and probably yes, there will be some lessons out there. Kunal, I'll move to you on this, and before asking you the same question around the enabling environment that you appreciate when it comes to scaling your technologies, I want to touch a little bit on the access to finance point that Tessa and Annelies has mentioned. That can technology be used to finance the transition to regenerative agriculture, technology and data? So I know that Cropin had also worked with insurance companies, and one of the things that was in my mind and one of the challenges that I see is that I often hear that there is a yield loss in the first few years of transition. Just as an open box thinking, do you think technology and data can be used to create some kind of an insurance or a income stabilization effect in the first few years of transition? Again, don't want any correct or wrong answer, but your thoughts on the role of technology and data providing access to finance.
Yeah, so certainly, so in some of our programs, while we were working on enhancing the productivity of the farmer at the farm level, when we started getting into the details of that, we understood that any change requires financing and reducing risk, right? So, and then we talked about in this vast majority, who are the farmers which are getting access to finance? So these are the farmers which are already having records, these are large holder farmers which have already have financial records, and the banks can easily finance them. But the set of farmers that we're talking about is the smallholder farmers, right? Which is a large majority. 70% of the farmers globally, if you see 80% plus of the farmers are smallholder farmers by classification. And many of the farmers do not have a record of transactions, which means I do not have the digital records of financing and things like that. Now it becomes very difficult and a risky proposition for a bank or an insurance company to come and pick up, sell a product to that particular user. The way to look at that problem and the way that we are approaching is that we are de-risking their entire portfolio by bringing that approach of knowing what is there as an asset for them to invest on, right? So for a plot of land of an acre for a farmer which has never been accessible to finance, what we are doing is we are actually building a layer of intelligence, which is using satellite and remote sensing. We are predicting the data of the last 3 years, that what crops the farmers took and what was the yield of that particular farmer. And at that point in time, what was the market price? So we could actually correlate the income potential of that particular farmer from that plot of land. Now, this information was never known to a bank, because if I go to a farmer, then the farmer will say, I was earning 100,000 rupees, but actually he's earning half of that, right? And the bank is always in that confused state. But here we are making that entire information transparent. And the advantage is the farmers which are actually doing the right things can actually showcase this information to the bank and get the access to finance. Now, the same model is also replicable when you are doing any transition. If you're getting into regenerative agriculture, it's the bank which would like to understand, because the bank would not be able to monitor all of these assets, tens of thousands of assets, which is all spread across. And technology plays a very important critical role. So if we can build that program that, I can help you in terms of loan origination, which are the right credible farmers. I can help you in terms of monitoring that particular loan as an asset, and also help you in terms of recovery. It becomes a valuable proposition for the bank. Now, the bank will say, my risk is still not gone, right? How do you bring that risk down? And that is where the technology comes in picture and say, this is our learning of the data that we have. We have been able to transform these many set of farmers by adopting this particular practice, and it is profitable in a certain manner. So I'm giving you a captive base of an asset, which is not you should not be looking at a season, but you're looking for a long-term asset for yourself. And you will easily cross a threshold of making good profits in a couple of seasons from now. So that's the proposition that banks looks, and there are a lot of banks which are looking at that as an opportunity of a long-term lifetime value of the customer and investing based on that. The third piece that also comes in picture is also that the partnerships that we make, right? If we know that these type of institutions are interested in that, that partnership actually helps the bank to finance that particular farmer and make that change. So which means if there is an institution, an organic company, or any institution which is actually focusing on that particular crop, and they can actually give a place an order for that particular farmer group or a certain cluster. This information becomes a very strong proposition for a bank, because there is an off-taker which is already there for that particular program. And eventually what we see is that all of these information as a part of the consortium becomes seamless and integrated, and actually supports the entire ecosystem to thrive, right? To the last point that I would like to make is that this change is actually difficult. While it's easy to talk through, it's so difficult to stitch the deals together, bring those partnerships, convince them in terms of that proposition, convince the farmer to change. And that's the biggest thing, right? How do you really convince the farmer to change? So I think in a long-term perspective, public institutions, policymakers have to really bring a lot of focus in bringing this particular change, right? And we are seeing Europe is talking about making the entire European agriculture carbon neutral by 2030, and we are part of their carbon coalition program. We have heard countries like India, which is talking that we will move towards natural agriculture, more nature-based farming, right? So there is a lot of public push from the public sector, which is also there, right? So I think once we see this particular push, then the institutions also start believing the story that the long term is in this particular direction, and they start investing. So I see there is a role of multiple institutions, and finally at the end is the consumer, right? We do all of these things, but the consumer is not differentiating the product to the regular product which is available as a commodity. The entire effort goes, it's net to net is zero, right? Now we have to also let the consumer be aware that what you are doing and how you're also contributing to the entire planet is very important, right? So only when the consumer pays a difference, right, a certain 10%, 20% or a 30% difference, is where the entire value chain would then see, a trader would see a value, a farming organization will see a value, and then the farmer will see a value, and that will actually resonate across the entire sustainability of the program. So I think at the end, it is all about the consumer. If we do not reduce that threshold of the consumer going and paying more and creating more value in the ecosystem, the sustainability of the program is at risk. And I think our job is also to enable the customer and the consumer to believe that journey and think that they are also contributing, not only consuming, but also contributing to the nature.
Thank you, Kunal. And at some point, one of the key things that's coming out is that the entire value chain has to be integrated and transparent, and so that it allows better service delivery to farmers. And this can be somehow facilitated via technology. And there are many ways that technology can help this, making a seamless and integrated value chain for regenerative agriculture. You also mentioned that the public sector is becoming very active in terms of regenerative agriculture in some countries, and even the private sector today is actually committing to net zero emissions, and for carbon offsetting, it becomes regenerative agriculture, and also insetting regenerative agriculture has a key role to play. Thank you for your points and the kind of things that are required to make this ecosystem. I'll just move to Annalise here to understand a little more about how IKEA Foundation plans to support regenerative agriculture in the future, and what are some of the key things that we'll do. In addition, if you have some ways in which you can directly or create an ecosystem for technology service providers, or if you have any thoughts that other donors can play or the public sector can play.
Yeah, thanks. So we're building up our portfolio since a few years now to really see with our partners to build the case, to build the evidence that it actually works. I think there's still a lot of data gathering to be done, that needs to be done. So we will continue with that. We will also invest, as we are currently doing, in really helping to make finance accessible, finance for farmers, but also finance for those companies that enable ag tech to enter the scene and to make that ecosystem possible. I think that's really key. There are a couple of programs that are running out there. I know later this afternoon, for example, Acumen is also speaking with the Acumen Resilient Agriculture Fund. Those kinds of investments are what we think can help change the system. And yeah, what we can do as a donor also is to really ensure that within each of the programs that we support, ag tech is taken into account, and that appropriate ag tech is taken into account, and as much as possible facilitates the delivery for the farmers. And I think that the final point goes back a little bit to what Kunal said, is that it is a global food and ag system change that is required. And we will continue to support programs that move that global systems change. It is incredibly helpful that governments like the EU are pushing for carbon neutral agriculture. It's incredibly helpful for smallholder farmers across the world that the global narrative is changing, that the global policies are changing. And yeah, I think that we will continue to, well, I know that we will continue to support those programs that help shift that narrative and that help shift the global system as well.
Great to have market builders like you, and especially when there's so much the need of the hour. I'll move to Tessa with a similar question on what IDH will do in the regenerative agriculture space and some of the things and how, if you have any specific ideas on how technology service providers can be supported through IDH, would be happy to hear your views. And after that, we'll close for some questions with the audience. There are a few questions that are coming.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's similar but complementary, I would say, to what Annelies was saying. So as IDH, we try to work in different what we call results areas. So we try to really work on changing the narrative, changing the dialogue within sectors, within landscapes. And I think that's incredibly important because that creates supportive, enabling environment for all those changes. So tabling those discussions, thinking around what are trade-offs, what are synergies, which currently I don't think we have that clear enough. But also, very simple example, making sure that we do not just talk about better environment, but that we talk about environment and farmer income as one big thing that we need to figure out, right? So tabling the right discussions, building the networks at a public sector and at a private sector is definitely a big thing that we work in for IDH. A second one, which I referred to a bit earlier, is really on that learning agenda. So what are the big questions to be answered to actually change that global system, to move away from projects into changing the system as a whole? So learning at, again, that sector level, but also in one-on-one partnerships with our private sector partners. So how can we help them, but also how can we push them to go the next mile? So that is definitely something that we work on. I see a big role for technology there, especially in bringing together the different pieces and seeing how then can we create that global picture. And then finally, and that's much more related to programs we do in the field, is how do we enable innovation? And that is through financing in our programs, co-financing a number of interventions, but it's also through pushing our partners to just take that slightly higher risk profile, right? And again, that can be through financing and investments, but that can also be through saying, guys, we think crop insurance is incredibly important here. Let's find a partner. Let's figure it out. These are the questions we want to answer. And then we share the learnings. So I really see a role at three different levels, really changing that narrative, tabling the discussions, asking the difficult questions, but also trying to build that answer. And do that at a sector or landscape level, but also one-on-one in partnerships. And then go do it. Go into the field, figure out what works, what doesn't work, innovate and finance these programs. And all of that hopefully then brings us to be able to scale this.
So one thing which is aligned, and all speakers are aligned, and I think everyone, is that it has to move from smaller programs to a global movement. And it's good to see that from the donor side, also from the market builder side, there are a few ways in which they can support this transition from smaller programs to global movements. And the technology service providers here already having some ways in which technology can enable the transition. So at this point, I'll stop for some audience questions. And Annelies had actually made a point on gender, which I missed and I did not get detailed into, and someone from the audience actually caught me on that. So this is a question which has been particularly directed to the technology service providers. The question is, how can you make your technologies more gender sensitive and intentional so that it doesn't create more of a divide than a bridge? So I'll let Tanya start if you have any thoughts on how agricultural technologies can be made more gender sensitive.
That's an interesting question, and I have to say that in our work at this moment, it's not very much reflected. Of course, a lot of the service providers, extension officers we're working with are mainly male. Also has to do with the education, the capacity building. But we do have a lot of training sessions in place where everyone is free to join. There could be created more incentive to focus more on, well, youth definitely as well, but also women to join as they're, of course, a vital part and contribute a lot on the field work, and in often cases do a lot of the essential field work. I think
Thank you, Tanya.
really, yeah.
Okay, so I think that's also a very important part that you mentioned about the trainings and creating incentives for women to join, because in India, I have often seen that when there are technology service providers who are doing their demos or who are actually sharing information on the technologies, it's mostly male staff that goes to the village, and the timings are also not right. It's not made in the most suitable way. So that's a very important point, to make the training and the entire planning process more inclusive and intentional, gender intentional. Kunal, do you have 2 or 3 points on how the technologies that you are developing or any digital technology can be made more gender sensitive?
So what we have seen is like, while the technology is the backbone, right? The content that you bring on the technology is actually could be like, either you can make it neutral or you can be more towards one gender. That's very important. Like, in some of our program, when we work with like, on the rural livelihood side, like when we talk about the ministries which are focused on the livelihood side, we see that 80 to 90% of the program beneficiaries are women, right? It's also the stakeholders which are engaged are women, as well as the beneficiaries are women, right? And when we implement those programs, in fact, like we implemented one of our projects with the World Bank, and a similar project that we are implementing again with the World Bank in another state. And we see that the entire program is oriented towards women, because what they have observed is that when smallholder farmers ecosystem, the woman is the individual which is actually contributing the maximum in the agriculture, right? And the second thing is the male is out, like, they're all in big cities and they're going for employment and things like that, but the farm is taken care by the woman, right? So the entire initiative is then how do you basically bring that the training and the capacity building of the women and make it much more sustainable. So that so the way that we build the content is more towards like, a woman talking about his own success story, her own success story is then shown to all of the women farmers and they get motivated, right? The way we put the language in the local context so that someone can actually understand and implement is also changes depending on that particular context, right? The third thing that we also do is we also analyze that, which of these programs, right, we can actually also highlight, right, from the traceability perspective. Like when we take the product to the market, right, we also in our traceability QR code, we also mention that information, right? So someone scans the QR code, that this is coming from producer group. These are all women-led producer groups, and this is what has happened. Right. In fact, in India, one of the largest, public sector, social programs in a state in Jharkhand, they have branded a product called Palash, and they also branding that this is the entire initiative is done by women. And there are some 30 to 40 SKUs which are there, and that's going to the market. Right. So I think there are ways and means in terms of structuring the program and enabling the program so that it becomes much more women inclusive. But fundamentally, what I believe is that at the implementation level, there is a very strong role of women, and we have seen that the success of these social institutions, be it producer groups or FPOs and all, becomes much more sustainable when women comes together and drives that. Right. We have also seen as a very, very successful use case, when a dollar goes to a woman farmer, right, 80 cents of that actually gets implemented, right? And then when a dollar goes to a male farmer, 80% of that goes outside of the system, right? It is not being used for the purpose for which is meant, right? So the effective finance is also de-risked when you are actually financing a group of women or a woman farmer in that particular perspective. So I think all these things adds up together that no, the woman is actually playing a very important role, and we should actually enable that through technology, through programs, and through institutionalizing that.
So there's much more than a social case to it. There's an economic case, there's a developmental case also to support women, and thank you for highlighting these points. The other question that has come in, and it's a little, I don't know if anyone has a right answer to this, but I'll start with Tessa first. So Tessa, someone in the audience is saying that how can we transit to regenerative agriculture when there are so many governments that are subsidizing the use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides? So do you have any suggestions on how we can compete, or I don't know if compete is the right word, but actually offset the subsidies that are there for the conventional agriculture?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and it actually well, it points to the right discussion to have, because this is indeed goes back to, we need to create an enabling environment that supports the transition to these systems, and the current system does not. And I do believe this is something that will change. So it also is a matter of creating more understanding, creating more intelligence, and we're learning along the way. And yes, definitely a number of the practices around regenerative agriculture have been around for a long time. The term actually was pretty popular in the 80s as well, but it is really come in the last 2 years or so. We've really seen it's back on everybody's radar, which shows it's a progression over time. And I do believe the same will happen here. What we need to do is make sure that we provide the learnings, show the data, and then build that in a way that also informs policymakers of the change that is needed and the role they can play, right? So I don't think we need to fight or offset these subsidies. I think we need to showcase that the other way around is the better way around and is the necessary way around. So it's about building that, and not just, again, not just focusing on the farmer. The farmer is front and center, but needs to be supported through policy, through markets, through finance. And we have a role to play to make sure that also that enabling environment gets the right information to enable them to make the right decisions to support the transition. So, and again, recognizing this is not an easy feat, right? But I think that's the answer. Do not fight it, just show that there is another way, a better way, a necessary way.
And Annelies, do you have anything to add to that? We had the closing 2 minutes, so 1 minute to you if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I think it's not only about showing that this is a better way. It is, in my opinion, also about countering those subsidies and really changing the narrative about it. At the same time, I also think, and well, the harsh reality of the war in Ukraine today is also already showing it. It has an incredible impact on food prices across the globe, not just in Ukraine, not just in Europe, across the globe, and especially also Africa is being hit by it. Because fertilizer prices are going up because of rising oil prices, and the war in Ukraine it's a very sad how do you say that start of this situation. I think climate change is the second one, but prices for chemical fertilizers will go up because of the lack of resources, and it is a finite resource that will have an end, a natural end to it. So we need to anticipate that and invest in regenerative agriculture right now to make people less dependent on external inputs, and to make them more resilient and more self-dependent on their own soil and their own natural environment. So I think reality will catch up with us anyway. And it's time to make sure that we anticipate the dire consequences of that.
Thank you, Annelies, and that's actually a great thought to actually leave everyone with, so that everyone is more proactive to the change. So I would like, we are at the closing hour, so I'd like to thank all the speakers for their time on this session. And while we covered a lot of things in the discussion and there are a lot of insights that came out, 3 or 4 things that I just want to summarize for the audience. The first one is that, yeah, regenerative agriculture, on regeneration and restoration rather than extraction. So that is something that has to be kept in mind. The second thing is that it is not only about the environment, but it is about keeping the farmer at the center. The third thing is that the benefits are there. The benefits are emerging, but we need to move out from a program level to a global level where there's a global dialogue around regenerative agriculture. Then finally, also, there are several use cases of technology for making risk transition, starting from risk mitigation to actually improving revenues to, let's say, traceability and market access to actually creating the data pools that are there. And finally, like by leveraging technology, I think we can hope to change the narrative that is out there. We can ask the right questions and actually learn so that the entire ecosystem can use these learnings to make the transition and support the transition in a way. And finally, it's also important to take risks and try out new innovations in technology that can really facilitate the transition. With this, thank you so much for your time. I have extended by a minute, but it's been a great session, and I hope to make a summary note and share with everyone who's there in the session. Thank you, everyone.